We don't have anything quite like it in the United States. Not that sort of verdant green pastures with the trees and the water and the sheep everywhere. And our sort of agricultural landscape is different. The one main high street, you know, we don't have that really unless you go to a very far off place. Stories have always been so healing and so helpful. That's why we have them, why we have books and movies and documentaries, and you know, there's something about the human experience and seeing someone else go through it that we learn from and find hope in. I want to tell the story about the people, not just the political aspect. It's actually what took me to Lockerbie.
Very, very quiet little town. Everybody knew each other. Just a small town, farming community. Everybody got on with everybody, you know. No problems at all.
I think everybody would say Lockerbie was a sort of typical rural southern Scottish town. Its population was about 3,000 maybe 30 years ago. It's slightly bigger now. So you had the chip shop and, you know, the town high street bustled. It was a market town, so agriculture, farming is big industry in the area. I came to the town initially as an 11-year-old from a primary school nearby and did my secondary education here from 1981 through to 86 when I left to join the police.
I thought it was so beautiful, shockingly so, that this horrible tragedy in my life could have fallen here.
Further down the road, come round the bend about another 3/4 of a mile. The whole road was, there's vehicles on the road ablaze, 2 houses ablaze, and the road's completely covered with masonry, beds, garden gates. The people in the houses wouldn't have any chance of getting out.
About 7 p.m, sitting watching TV, heard this noise and looked out the window. And this great big flash, complete darkness. We were all in the dark. The kids were screaming, they were running down the stairs. Managed to find a torch and tried to open the door. There were great boulders, their soil, and the smell of aviation fuel, unbelievable. So managed to get out and shone the torch about. I couldn't believe it. There were bodies all over the place.
Good evening. A Pan Am jumbo jet with 258 people on board has crashed tonight just north of the Scottish border.
I had dreams of planes cracking in half and blowing up, and I thought I was losing my mind. I went to the hospital one day thinking I was having a heart attack. I'd never had panic attacks before. I wanted to go and change it to the Pan Am flight with Theo, and I didn't have enough money. We had just gone to Paris, and I was a student. And so I just went back to her, and I said, I'll be fine. This is ridiculous. This is stupid. I'll just bear my way through it. So I didn't end up on that flight.
Pan Am Flight 103 started in Frankfurt, but passengers didn't board the 747 until transferring at Heathrow. The plane took off at 6:25, 25 minutes late. It climbed to 31,000 feet, passing over the Scottish border right on course. Some 50 minutes after takeoff, shortly after the last radio contact, The aircraft disappeared from radar screens, apparently exploding in mid-air. The main parts of the plane hit Lockerbie in a ball of fire, but wreckage and burning fuel spread over a much wider area, most falling in an area roughly 10 miles by 6, but some debris landing 80 miles away. The cockpit landed 3 miles away, in Tundergarth, a cabin door near Langham, and clothing at Westerkirk, the result of a massive explosion.
That night, I came home from work, travelled all the way back from Newton Stewart, where I was based, got changed. I told my parents I was off to this party in Lockerbie. I'm 2 or 3 minutes away from Lockerbie. There was this huge explosion. This explosion got bigger and bigger, to the point it must have been about 300 feet in the air. So I came off the road, went past the hotel I was due to go to the party at, and there were people running towards the town, and I got concerned that they may be getting into difficulty with the fire. This sergeant more or less bumped into me in Sherwood Crescent, Sherwood Park area, and he said, "There's a huge hole in the road. We're not sure exactly what it is, but you'd better go to the police station and sign on."
Pan Am jumbo jet with 258 people on board.
First pictures from the devastated town of Lockerbie.
Both Scotland and England were strewn with wreckage.
There's no indication that there was anything out of the norm with this aircraft this evening.
The abiding memory I've got of those minutes was just the sheer confusion. There were conflicting reports. There was reports of the petrol station having exploded. Well, we knew that wasn't true, but then there was damage being reported to houses on the other side of town. I think, well, is that true? Because the explosion was in Sherwood Crescent. But it turned out that that was in fact correct.
I was a very young, keen firefighter, and I was probably involved with Sherwood Crescent for most of my incident. Unfortunately, it turns out that one of the main engines had come down and pierced the main water supply into Lockerbie. And Lockerbie's on a ring main, so it had an effect on a massive part of the area.
The crater was next to a main road where 5 vehicles were caught in the ferocity of the explosion. Their drivers are among the dead. One man narrowly escaped, but watched his house burn down.
We're in the house in Sherwood Park about 7 o'clock when there was this almighty bang. My son and I were in the house, so I said, "Get down." And the whole sky lit up. And I realised it was a plane. But there was debris falling everywhere, and I thought the whole roof was going to cave in on us at the time. But I looked out the back window, and all I could see was fires starting up, you know, just right over the whole countryside was ablaze.
In the corner, I had a hedge, and this hedge, it was right all the way down flat, but part of the hedge, there were a body lying over it. And I shone the torch, and this body had only one shoe on. We weren't allowed back in this house.
I'm standing at this door in Bridge Street when a farmer came from the hills, from the darkness and east side of Lockerbie. He'd loaded up the pickup truck with one of the inflatable chutes that is deployed when the emergency exit doors are opened and so on. There was one of those and some fuselage. We had seen that there was a passenger in the front passenger seat of his pickup truck. Just looked like they were asleep, you know. But it turned out that this was a toddler that had been from the plane and was in fact dead. He'd explained that he was worried that the child was out in the field and exposed to the wildlife and so on, so he thought this was the best thing he could do.
We had spent the day sort of moving flats. So Miriam was down below in an apartment down below. Theo and I weren't living in the same flat. She was living in one flat below me. And then Turhan and Luann, who were on the flight, were in my apartment with my friends, Mike and Hank. We had spent all day together, and Theo and I actually, we called it our Last Supper, ironically, but we and Daniel walked to Portobello Market and had our favorite falafel for lunch that we loved. And I started having pretty severe panic attack, but I was trying to keep it really like on the down low because I didn't want to freak everybody out. So when they finally left, I crawled back into the living room and I was trying to distract myself. And this had been going on for a while, like trying, and I finally turned on the television to just anything to keep my mind off of why I was feeling this way, and the BBC popped up and it said a plane was missing. They didn't know where it was going, and I knew instantly.
Fortunately, the huge cockpit crashed to Earth 3 miles away on a deserted hillside. Eyewitnesses said the shattering force of the collision made it almost impossible anyone could have survived. For such was the force of the explosion that blew apart Flight Pan Am 103. It shattered into 1 million pieces, spread over 10 square miles of countryside. And such was the suddenness that though this doctor looked forlornly through the cockpit wreckage for any survivors, there wasn't even time for those on board to make a mayday call.
Well, there must be about at least 6 houses. It's just not there.
I felt the heat and I seen everything coming over, like, but as I say, most of it, so I took across there and over the petrol station. The house is at the back there, there's an engine line in the farm.
The Crown took in new guests last night. The Whittles arrived late and homeless.
From what we've seen and what we've heard, we think we're lucky.
I'm very lucky. I don't know if we've got any damage or not.
Got slightly damaged, and the Phil's car next door slightly damaged, but we've got nothing. We've got nothing.
It's going to take a long time, isn't it, for the town to get back to normal? I'd ever forget that.
How can it get back to normal?
Forget it. I mean, there's people that we probably know that are worse than us.
You can go and have a look at it now.
Can I?
Yep.
Thank you.
How do you feel about it now?
Very, very relieved. For us, I'm very sorry for poor devils down there.
A disaster actually gets worse as it goes along because the whole extent and the whole enormity widens out. The picture gets bigger and bigger and bigger and gets worse.
Syracuse University had an overseas semester, and the theater department had a specific program in London because, of course, the West End and all the theater. So we all were really excited. Theodore Cohen, my best friend and roommate at the time, we had a flat, an apartment in Syracuse together. Turhan Ergen was my roommate in London. Miriam Wolfe was from the drama department. Nicole Boulanger was from the drama department. Luann Rogers was my roommate as well in London, but she came from a different school, so I'd only just met her when we got to London. Wendy Lincoln, I knew, who was also on the flight. She was an art student, but a roommate of a friend of mine. And then Daniel Rosenthal, who was not actually part of Syracuse, but a friend of a friend who we ran into literally in Piccadilly Circus one day and started hanging out. We saw every West End show, we saw every Fringe, we saw every backdoor pub, funky, weird thing you could see. I mean, we were just obsessed with that opportunity to see this incredible amount of theater at our fingertips. It was just such a very alive time in our lives because we were finding our feet as young university students and being in control of our daily lives and what we could do. And as an American, when you're that age, we hung out in the pubs because you could. We couldn't here. So we drank a lot of beer and hung out.
I'm Amy Engelhart, and I'm a composer, lyricist, playwright, singer, producer, director, what's the gig? I knew 5 of the 35 Syracuse students who were aboard Pan Am 103, as I was a senior when they were, I think, freshmen or sophomores possibly in the drama department at Syracuse University. The person that I knew the best was Miriam Wolfe. Miriam was like a sunflower. Miriam was known for just showing up when you were at your lowest point and bringing you flowers or treats or bringing roses for you when you'd accomplished something, or she was just unflappable. Sometimes almost irritatingly so. She was an absolute gem of a person, and I don't think she had realized yet her value in that.
Just so you guys can see, that's Catherine Crossland. That's the picture of the crying cheerleader. It's so close, you know, it's just very personal when it's that close. But she and I are friends to this day, bound together in an unusual way, you know. I'm Lawrence Mason Jr., retired professor of visual communication at the S.I. Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University. And I taught 9 victims of Pan Am Flight 103. I remember the day so well. December 21st, 1988. And I was firmly ensconced at my dining room table wrapping Christmas presents. Music on, and the phone rang. And it was the New York State Director of United Press International Photos. And I was the local coordinator for UPI Photos in Syracuse. And he said, we're getting reports there were as many as 40 Syracuse University students on that plane coming back from study abroad in London. Like, whoa. Now I know why he's calling me. They're going to need news pictures out of Syracuse. I've worked with a partner on United Press International, David Grunfeld. So we stopped down to the court just before the game, and I immediately encountered a young woman named Catherine Crossland, who was a student of mine that semester. And so I went up to her. I said, Catherine, how are you? How are you doing? And she said that she had reason to believe that she lost a sorority sister on board Pan Am 103, and she was very, very distraught. I wasn't even thinking of shooting a picture at that moment, but David was nearby, and he saw the moment, and he shot it. We shot some basketball action too, as well, and went up to our darkroom, and we had to develop film, and we had to print a picture, and we had to type a caption, and we had to put it on a transmitter, and you know, it's just a big process before digital. I wanted to give Catherine a chance to say, that's too personal, I really wish you wouldn't use it. But without that, I just had to go with the news judgment and say, okay, we're gonna send it. And it ran all over the place.
Back in the 80s, we had these coin-operated phones, stupid phones where you had to like put in like pence and to get it to work. And I didn't have the right coins. And I went to the neighbors and I knocked on the door to like make change for me. And they took one look at me and took me into their home and took care of me until the secretary came and then led me to the Syracuse office. We were stuck and surrounded by press for 5 or 6 hours.
At the airports last night, people waited in silence for news of their relatives. For quite some time, Pan Am would only confirm there had been a crash and couldn't answer their questions.
My friend Hank had come back with his family and we had reunited, and he and I walked back to Miriam's flat, and we just sat in the front room. Actually, the pull-out bed was pulled out because that's where I was supposed to sleep. And we watched, on the BBC, we watched Nicole's mother find out because she had a camera in her face at JFK.
A notice board simply directed people inquiring about the plane to see an agent. Despite the widespread publicity, many arrived to meet the flight, only to be told for the first time that there had been a crash. Pan Am officials began the grim task of breaking the news. There was almost no hope that their relatives had survived.
And I watched Theo's mother being escorted live, if you can imagine. I mean, live on BBC, her being taken into a room, crying and screaming. And we turned on the television because we couldn't take it anymore, and we just held hands. And we just watched the sunrise in silence, like just silence.
Cheesesteak, peppers and onions on the side, and pizza sauce.
Did they give you any sauce?
Yes.
We have been able to see Rick when he was in London. We spent 3 or 4 days in London. Yeah. And it was great, you know. It was great to be with him. It was great. We had never been to London, so it was wonderful to go to the museums and art galleries and all of that. Kara was 15 when Pan Am 103 happened. She stayed home from school that day. She was watching her favorite soap opera when they broke in and said that a plane leaving London for JFK had disappeared. I was on my way home from work, but she called you. You were working in Philadelphia at the time. And so when I got here, I saw a neighbor's car in the side of the house, and I thought, something must have happened to the cat. That's the first thing that came to my mind. Something happened to the cat. And when I came in, she said, I think Rick's plane went down.
They found all the female sheep who were pregnant had aborted. All of them, from the shock of everything that had happened. What did they feel? What made them do that? The shock of the explosion, did the earth shake? Like, I don't, you know, it just, to hear that story was just, gave me chills. That it was not just the people, but the land and the livestock that were affected there.
The town awoke this morning determined to carry on. There was still a routine to stick to, a need for normality. That's why Hunter Wilson and his staff were baking bread at 5 this morning, not just for the townsfolk, but for the rescue services and the media.
I'm afraid busy for the wrong reasons today.
Surrounded by farmland, Lockerbie is a compact community, shocked that the most deadly debris should have fallen on their streets and homes rather than scattered across neighbouring open country. A housing estate alongside the busy A74 took the full force of an impact that blasted a crater 30 feet deep where houses once stood. The flight deck, however, landed in a field 3 miles away, crushed and spilling the contents of the cockpit. An engine plunged into a farmyard. Eyewitnesses said the spinning metal fell amid sheets of flame. Other massive sections fell across a wide area, some 80 miles away. But it was the damage within Lockerbie that left the town in shock.
Milk tankers were filled up, everybody improvised. You know, the community came together, different agencies, organisations came together. I can always remember the young soldiers that were there helping to search when I was up at Rosebank and thinking how young they were, 16, 17-year-olds, having to deal with this. And for me to think that, and I was 23, not that much older, but the soldiers had to deal with a lot more than what we did.
Police diving teams are now searching the lakes and locks downwind of the crash site. It's thought some bodies and wreckage could lie here.
I found a body part and it had the person's identification on it. Being young, I picked it up because it was a green emerald, like gold ring. And I took it to the police because that was somebody's identification. It was the wrong thing to do. I was only 23, so the police officer was quite adamant I had to go and put it back. He explained why, so I had to put it back, but I always hope that that gave closure to a family, you know. I mean, I saw other stuff as well, but that's the thing that has stuck with me. And I just pray that that family got that ring back.
That's an aircraft engine, just about level with the road. You can see there, that's how high the amount of rubble was there. And there between pieces of plane, Ella Ramsden's house. This was later on in the morning, but in the morning there was a body strapped in the seat, still up in that room. Kind of growing up, you know, but no, just horrendous, you know, absolutely horrendous.
And as we sifted through the wreckage, there was body after body after body. It was really devastating. We are trained for such occasions, but in my many years as a fireman, I think this is the worst I've ever come across.
It's really quite sickening.
Yeah, very sickening.
Donna, the border collie, knows every inch and every boulder of the crash site. For 7 days, she has worked the rubble. As debris is removed, she searches again and again for anything carrying human scent. She has detected remains under rubble that is 4 foot 6 inches deep. Donna's father, Shep, is the veteran of the 50 dogs now in Lockerbie. Their owners are all volunteers who formed the Search and Rescue Dog Association to standardise training across the country. On the night of the crash, police escorts brought them from homes hundreds of miles away. And in the first 2 hours, they'd found 111 bodies under hazardous conditions.
The vast amount of broken glass, the heat, the smoke, and probably worst of all, the aviation fuel, because it tended to deaden the scent. And we could only work for something like 10 minutes at a time. They're used to mountain rescue incidents, and this was so different. The stress on the handlers, let alone the dogs. And you've got to remember the dog and handler work as a team. So anything the handler feels, he transmits it to the dog. And we were transmitting our stress at some times.
Debriefing is important. Learning, because we all make mistakes. It's just dealing with them and making things better. Less chance of making them again. Yeah, I think all organisations have learned, because that was probably one of the first terrorist attacks. We've got the type of brain that it does put things in the filing cabinet back. It's strange Because I know other people that can remember so many different things. I've been to jobs with people and they've said I was there and I've blanked it out. I'm fortunate that I probably blank out the bad stuff. So whether it comes back one day, I don't know. Hope not.
This is my own psychological analysis of myself, but I had mixed feelings about grief and who is entitled to grief. I know that sounds a little strange, but as I was not BFFs with these people, and I was not a relative, or technically a classmate for very long, I didn't feel like I was permitted somehow to feel this loss as deeply as I did. And watching them go through it and being there for them as they went through it, which is one of the biggest honors of my life. Honestly, just being able to stand there and be there for them. Made me realize how much showing up means. And that can take many forms. The care extended past those directly affected by the tragedy. I mean, Colin Dorrance regularly hosts visitors from all over the world who have been affected in any way by this tragedy. I mean, he does a lot of other amazing charitable activities. That's why he got the MBE. But to them, you are a survivor if you care. If you care, they will take care of you. I like to think of myself as this, you know, hard-ass comedy writer person from New Jersey with a potty mouth, but I was absolutely bowled over by the care and kindness of those people. And that's, I think I would have taken that away anyway, but I felt like I got to see it in all its depth by being there with Kim and Renee. This incident is universal, no matter what the tragedy is. I mean, sadly, everyone knows someone now, or knows someone who is affected by this kind of a massive tragedy, whether that's COVID, any terrorist attack, any school shootings. It's terrible. And the helplessness that people feel and wanting to do something and not being able to is universal.
On a hilltop outside the town, firemen and rescue services have spent Christmas Eve working round the shattered cockpit of Flight 103, sifting through the wreckage. Hundreds of police from forces throughout Scotland are now involved in the search for debris. Reports are coming in from far and wide of further sightings. Stretchers were ferried in for the grim task of recovering the remains of the victims. The bodies were flown out by helicopters. On all the hillsides surrounding Lockerbie, stretcher parties were at work. They were taken to the temporary morgue in the town hall, where their relatives faced the distressing task of identifying them. The personal belongings of the victims are being stored in this warehouse. A careful log is being kept of exactly where they were found to help with the task of identification. All of this wreckage from the aircraft was collected from just one street in Lockerbie. At a local bus stop, part of the engine still lies buried only feet from the pavement. And in the shattered and still smoking remains of Sherwood Crescent, They are painstakingly picking their way through the rubble. 10 local people, including 3 children, are reported to be missing.
My name is Richard Hartunian, and my involvement in the Pan Am story relates to my 21-year-old sister, Lynn. She was a communications major at the State University of New York at Oswego, and she was traveling abroad with her friends, having the trip of a lifetime, checking in with us periodically from different countries that she was at. Looking forward to having her come home at Christmas. My mother had the house decorated as she did every Christmas, but this one she took some particular care to really deck the halls. We got the terrible news that afternoon when the press reports started to hit, and I ended up being the one to go to the Albany airport where she was to arrive, and was told that the Pan Am folks in New York wanted to know who, if anyone, was at Albany, and that was a signal to me that there was a problem. Before that, I couldn't even fathom, when I was called by family members, that we could be involved in anything like this, because acts of terror, most terror victims will tell you, only happen to other people, or so you think.
The accident investigators have their base at Farnborough. It's there that the flight recorders will be analysed to see if they can explain the cause of the crash. The flight data recorder monitors continuously a wide range of information from the plane's machinery.
It's been revealed today that the Americans recently received 2 warnings that an aircraft flying between Frankfurt and New York would be the target of a terrorist attack.
Tonight it emerged that an anonymous caller with a Middle East accent phoned the US Embassy in Helsinki 2 weeks ago. The caller said the Abu Nidal group planned to put a bomb on a Pan Am flight to the US, and it would be carried by a Finnish woman.
The White House spokesman said this morning there was now no question that public notification of such threats must be considered.
I don't know how I got the State Department's number, but I did. And they knew nothing either. So we were just lost. And then neighbors started coming. And I'm trying to clean up the house because, God forbid, they should think I'm a lousy housekeeper. And, you know, it gave me something to do. I was so scared. I was so upset. I didn't know what was going on. And then we started getting phone calls from Chicago Tribune and Los Angeles Times and, you know, all of the newspapers, local newspapers and everything. What's strange is that I'm a news junkie, and for the next couple of days, of course, I didn't look at newspapers or anything. And we had people, well, there were people over all the time. And one of them said, yeah, well, they think it's a bomb. And I said, what?
The PFLP-GC, a Palestinian terror group based in the Syrian capital Damascus under the leadership of Ahmed Jibril, were always the prime suspects for Lockerbie. At the time, they were funded by Iran.
It is here at Heathrow that the baggage is transferred in containers in what some experts see as an inevitably vulnerable process. The through baggage from Frankfurt stays in its containers, much of it uninspected cargo. An attempt is made to check passenger lists against baggage tags, but it is not foolproof.
After this horrible tragedy, they had no clue. They had no clue. And that was the beginning. People who went over to Lockerbie right after the tragedy, they said all the State Department did was stamp papers. And, you know, they did nothing more than that. And it took a long time for Rick's body to be identified.
Eventually, the Scottish police and the FBI started talking to each other, and they got
Right.
better at it, but the
Right.
State Department was useless.
Yeah.
We got together with the State Department, did a training video for the State Department how to handle victims of terrorism's families. And so they may still have the training video, but they're still not good at it.
Right. They're not trained for that. They really aren't. We received clothing and stuff from Rick, but the State Department sent it to us right before Mother's Day. Yeah. And it said compliments of your State Department.
My name is Judy O'Rourke, and I am retired from Syracuse University. I've been mentor to the Remembrance and Lockerbie Scholars since the program started, which was in 1988. The media, in my opinion, ranked very, very low. Horrible. Printing, quote, manifests of the people on Pan Am 103 before any of it was verified. So people's names were put out there who were not on the plane. People found out that their loved one was on the plane by this manifest that was on a TV station.
Just let them put their head on my shoulder and cry. You know, what words can you use? Give them a hug and just say, hey, I care.
Putting your microphone and your camera on someone who's clearly distraught and demanding that they tell you how they feel. Just truly awful human-to-human contact. 35 years on, we're in danger of forgetting many of those lessons, but at the same time, we still do remember them. And I think most people in the media are cognizant that they are dealing with other people that they need to treat well.
It was a different age in 1988, believe it or not. You know, we know now, looking back 30 years, the government had very little information to share. I reached out to our, local government officials, and although they're good people, they didn't have much to offer. We ended up actually using the press to help get information. As they camped out outside of my parents' home, I ended up communicating and getting to know them, and they would get press reports more quickly than any other source of information we had. So it was a very, very difficult 3 weeks until my sister's body was recovered. And ultimately, we ended up hiring a forensic pathologist who went over and ended up aiding in the investigation. First official act was to help locate my sister. And so after obtaining some samples of hair and other things that might help identify her, we got word about 3 weeks later, on my birthday, on January 13th, 1989, that she had been located. So we brought her home. We had a beautiful memorial service for her. And then we went on to try to make some sense of it all.
Do you get any guidance from Pan Am or the government?
Absolutely none.
We watch that every day glazed over on our news, and we don't think about the possibility of ramming into our lives.
No ordinary life left for us.
They were too afraid because of the ongoing threat of Gaddafi wanting to bomb American planes.
How big is the danger that we might see a repeat of what happened in Iraq happening in Libya?
This is why we're here. This is my daughter. This is Theo Cohen.
We became thrust into this international crime story that still, 30 years later, is unfolding.
Many of the ways that you take for granted when you fly in the United States are the result of what the victims of Pan Am families did.
They've become quite savvy and have been really helpful to families and communities and groups who have experienced subsequent high-profile traumas.